Vida. We are delighted to introduce the last session of the day, You Can't Be Serious. Actor and author Kal Penn's recent memoir, You Can't Be Serious, is a heartfelt and hilarious narrative tracing his journey from a son of an immigrant parent to a Hollywood star and White House aide. Penn explores the nuances of identity, racism, and the American dream with insight, humor, and unexpected twists. In conversation with the managing director of TV9, Barun Das, I would now like to introduce our speakers for this session. Kal Penn is an Emmy nominated actor, writer, and producer, best known for his roles in Designated Survivor, House, Mira Nair's The Namesake, How I Met Your Mother, and the Herlin Kumar franchise. His best selling book and audiobook, You Can Be Serious, is filled with humor and insight and is available now. He is in conversation with Barun Das, an alumnus of IIT Madras, IIM Calcutta, and the London School of Economics. Mr. Barun Das has held top management positions at Zee News, India Today Group, ABP Group, and Astro All Asia Networks. He is presently MD and CEO TV9 Network. He has steered TV9 towards becoming the undisputed news television leader in the country. The network has recently launched TV9 Plus, the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform. Barun hosts the award-winning OTT talk show Duologue with Barun Das. It's a two-way cerebral exchange of ideas, fostering free-flowing discussions that break away from headline management. I now invite our speakers to begin the session. Please make a big round of applause. Please make some noise.
How's it going? Nice to see you all. That's right.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello. 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 It's on? Okay. All right. For once I came onto the stage where nobody clapped for me.
That's not true. They clapped for both of us.
Right. You can't be serious.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you that you can't be serious to tell me that I can't be serious. Impossible. You know, I run the largest news network of a country.
Yep.
And I've been asked to be serious from the word go.
I bet. And you must have to do a really good job at that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kal, for doing this session. Brilliant audience. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, guys.
Kal, geometry, maths, you detested it.
Okay, this is the best leading question I've ever gotten.
Thank you very much.
What he's talking about it. So this book that I wrote is a memoir. It's generally like I love reading. Period. I assume that's why we're all here. But some of my favorite memoir-wise are like Mindy Kaling, Tina Fey, books that you can read on the train or if you're like on vacation. That kind of stuff that like flows really freely. But both of those books have a lot of heart to them and a lot of passion, and there are some serious moments in them. And so I think what you're referring to is my 10th grade?
Yep.
10th grade. 8th grade. Geometry teacher. So I'm not very good at math, which might shock you, A, because I'm an actor, and B, because I have brown immigrant parents. But I was always terrible at math. And in 8th grade, there's a chapter I write about this in the book. My dad basically realized, like, okay, all this acting nonsense is like, you're good at it, but how come you're also not good at algebra? And I said, well, algebra doesn't have a plot. And he's like, I don't understand. Like, you can remember a thick script for a school play, but you can't remember an equation. What is the equation for a circle?
Pi
r squared, right? That's the jet lag. That's not me being actually that stupid. But at the time I was, right? And so my dad would say, how come you can't remember these equations? And I would say, because geometry doesn't have a plot. So he said like the most basic dad thing ever, which is, so make a plot. I was like, how are you going to make a plot for a geometry equation? So what are other equations? What's the triangle one?
Triangle one?
Yeah.
There are many. Which one do you want?
I don't know. What's
You have a perimeter equation, 2 pi r.
Yeah.
This is circumference. You know, they will all go to sleep if we
All
start.
right, let's just do pi r squared for the sake of argument, right? So I was in my room brainstorming, like, how do I make a story out of geometry? And because I had a weird brain, even as a 14-year-old, I decided that the only story I could possibly make up in looking at pi r square in a circle was that I was going to imagine a character, I can't remember her name, Becky maybe, something like that. And Becky had, she was very voluptuous. And so I just imagined her breasts as pi r squared. And so I decided to take my dad's advice. And there was a night where I was brushing my teeth with my shirt off in boxer shorts in the bathroom. And I apparently left the door open and I was doing this. Pi r squared. Do you like that pi r squared? This is pi r squared. And my dad walked in. And he said,
Dad and mom both.
But dad and mom both. And my dad was like, Asuche. And my mom was like, Asukareche tu. And I was like, you told me. You said to make the acting geometry thing happen. So I was trying. They're like, go to your room and study. So I knew from that point on that I probably could not do anything math related. That's the long version to your question. What about you? Do you have any math stories?
Yeah, math stories is such that, you know, I come from the completely other side.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't convert things into numbers, it doesn't go into my head.
Okay.
You know, I read a book in the childhood. It's a Bengali writer, I think if I remember it correctly, Parasuram. It's his pseudonym. So he said that why do people ask questions and give descriptive answers? Like if you go out on the street and say that, how are you doing? So the person says, you know, I was not well yesterday, I'm recovering, this, that and all. So the author is saying, why can't people just talk in numbers? He'll say in a scale of 10, 10 out of 10 is brilliant. So he'll say, still yesterday I was 6, he was having fever. And today I'm about 8 because I'm recovering. So I come from that school of thoughts where if you convert things into numbers, it's far more easy for me. As long as you're not talking in numbers, nothing goes inside this head.
All right, so this is like when I would get like a 96 on an exam, and my mom would say, "What happened to the other 4 points?"
You know, in 8th grade, I was reading your book. You actually got far less than that. You got 87.
I was trying to inflate it. That's true.
You know, you're
true.
giving yourself more marks than that. You got only 87, and your mom was upset about 13.
He read
4.
the book.
Okay.
He read the book. Yes.
No, you know, another thing about the book, I must tell you, Kal, that I normally read books like speed reading. You know, I don't read, I view them. I try and do that. But your book is something that I could not speed read. I got stuck to it. And therefore, I remember most of it. Brilliantly written, and you have converted tough things into humor, which is what I wanted to learn. I mean, if I have to learn one thing in life, that how not to be serious, and you're asking me, yet you can't be serious.
So it was a slow read, not because of all the big words.
No, not because
There are no big words in the book. There's like 4 big words, I think.
not the big words, but the way you converted a tough subject into a simple narrative, and more importantly, you spoke from your heart.
Thank you.
You know,
That was important to me in writing. You know, I usually write scripts, which are fiction. You make them up in your head. I found the experience of writing a memoir to be far more difficult, or challenging is probably the better word, than writing a script. And the easiest reason for that, I realized, was like, okay, you're writing a script, you're making everything up. The plot lines can be whatever they are, pi r squared or anything else. And when I pitched this book, I pitched it like I was telling you, I'd like it to be a fun, silly memoir that has a lot of heart. And also the subtext of this book is about systemic change in Hollywood and Washington. So in that sense, it's aspirational. And when I pitched it with that. I wrote the first draft of the first 3 chapters are like the growing up as the son of immigrant parents, grandparents being Gandhians, and growing up sort of in a secular, Hindu secular household, and then getting bullied in middle school. And I turned in the first draft of the first 3 chapters, and my editor, instead of sending notes back, she just called me and she's like, "Hey, so like you pitched us a funny book." I was like, "Yeah, what'd you think?" She goes, "This is like some really dark shit." And I realized that the reason for that is that I'm so used to writing fiction that as an actor, when I'm reliving things that I experienced, even if they happened 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, I'm experiencing them with emotion because that's what actors do. And so I had to sort of take a break, do another pass on it that was devoid of like, I had already put the emotion in there. So then like add the humor that obviously as an adult looking back, you have, right? You can laugh at yourself, you can be self-deprecating. But to your point about, I'm so glad that you took the time with the book because it was one of those things that was important to me to include that nuance that, that I'm glad you took away.
You know, that brings me to that, most of your book, it talks about the discrimination and your being an actor. I've always thought that art is one rare man-made concept which is supposed to unite. I mean, if you talk about language, if you talk about religion, if you talk about politics, all these are divisive. That separates people from each other. But art is something that is supposed to unite. And you talk about this discrimination that you faced. Do you think it's a conscious thing? It comes from somewhere? For instance, when I was watching Big Bang Theory, if you have seen it, it's a very, very powerful, very popular series. The Raj Kutrapali, when the four friends used to sit down and have dinner, he would always sit on the floor. So is it something that is driven consciously by the Western world, or it is something that we invite upon ourselves?
That's such a great question. I think, it's a good segue to sort of talking about when I started in entertainment, because I think it's very different, 20 years ago than it is now in a good way. So, when I started as an actor, there were very few people who looked like me. I think that the two who I really continue to admire are Sarita Choudhury and Ajay Naidu. I sort of, to overuse a phrase, I feel like I stand on their shoulders in many ways. And there were certainly people who came before them or around the same time who were Indian American or South Asian American in Hollywood and in theater in New York, but never had the opportunity for name recognition that maybe Sarita and Ajay do. So there are a whole bunch of people out there. And when I started as an actor, I had the privilege of going to a publicly funded performing arts high school in New Jersey, where I was born and raised. And were it not for that opportunity, I mean, I'm the son of an engineer and a chemist, basically. So they did not move to America for me to do stoner movies. I can tell you that as a fact. So when I wanted to be an actor, I moved to LA, and the first thing that I realized is back then, if you were brown, you were only getting seen for roles that were bit parts, and those bit parts were fairly stereotypical. And I feel like it's important to contextualize what I mean by that. They would usually be certain types of professions, or they would have heavily accented English. And there were a couple of challenges with this, is that in the States, especially for Asian Americans broadly, there's this misperception that we're constantly foreigners, that we're never Americans, right? So there's a stigma associated with that. But the bigger challenge is like, just because somebody has an accent doesn't mean something is a stereotype. The challenge with portrayals historically, and again, this has changed wonderfully in the last, especially 10 years, but the challenge with that is if there's an accent, generally it's used in a reductionist manner, right? And so I would have friends who would say, you're auditioning for this part? I mean, it's a cab driver and he has an accent. As if being a taxi driver is somehow not a noble profession. As if somehow having an accent is the problem. And I think what folks are really trying to say is that Hollywood historically has pigeonholed certain roles as a function of the lead characters who tend not to be South Asian. And so once we figured that out, it was a conversation about like, well, then what do you do to get your foot in the door? In some cases, it means you're going to have to take jobs that maybe you don't want to take, like any profession, anywhere, ever, to build up your resume. And then in other cases, it's, how to be strategic about that. So I think that's that in a nutshell. But I will say, you mentioned a really interesting thing that I would love to hear your thoughts on too, which is what's the role of art? I'll jump ahead a little bit. We can go back if you want to hear the sort of early Hollywood discrimination stuff. But when we did the second Harold and Kumar movie, it's called Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay. Obviously a satire. And about 6 months after that movie came out, I ran into a senior member of the George Bush administration, so the ones who had opened Guantanamo. And this person looked at me, and I looked at this person, and I realized immediately that this would be the best selfie ever. It's like, if I can get a selfie with this dude, then it'll just piss off a lot of people. So I said, excuse me, so-and-so, I would love to get a selfie with you. My name is, he goes, Kal Penn, I know exactly who you are. You're very funny. And I was like, oh, how did I bring joy to your life? I don't understand. And he said, I'm a big fan of Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay. A lot of people in the Bush White House have seen it and have enjoyed it. And from the look on my face, he could tell that I was shocked. And he said, were we not supposed to like it? And I said, on the contrary, we make these movies as satires with the hope that everybody, regardless of their political affiliation, where they live in the world, hopefully they can watch these movies and just laugh with the characters. And we had hoped that that was the reality. The demographic reports that we get from screenings reflect that that's probably what's happening. But you have just given me the biggest proof in the world that people can laugh about something that they might politically disagree with. And then I was like, has President Bush seen it? And he's like, no, I don't think so. I was like, all right, well, you can't have everything. But the point is, yeah, I think I think different folks have different opinions on the role of art. But with respect to specifically those movies, I think I take a lot of pride in the fact that hopefully it's for everybody.
Right. I think this is better. You should switch off the other one. So I think I have a take on this.
Yeah.
I run the largest news network of India, which is the largest democracy in the world. And I keep saying that every Indian will have a view on two things. One is what the Indian cricket captain is supposed to do when the team is not doing well on the ground, and what the news channels should cover. And I keep telling them that a democracy gets a leader and a news channel exactly what they deserve, right? So this discrimination, this brownness that we face, I wanted to ask you, because you're at the helm of things, that why doesn't it happen to the blacks? After you went back from White House, you got a call from someone and he wanted to cast you in a movie, and then the producer never called back, and they said that they don't want to have two colored person in the same movie, and Denzel Washington was the other colored person. So you actually broke out. But I'm saying that why do we get discriminated? Does it have anything to do with the way we conduct ourselves? Some of my, the way we'll come to this auntie part of yours. That's something which is very ingrained in us. But does it have anything to do with us, that how we are treated in the world?
I think what you're referencing happens to all different groups at different times. And I think one of the big misnomers about different ethnic groups in the United States, obviously everybody is an immigrant unless you're Native American, but the misnomer is that that things are the same for every group. And I don't think that you can put, for example, the wave of Indian immigrants who came post-1965 to the US, they were allowed in to fill a labor shortage, primarily in engineering and medicine. So you can't put their immigration experience in with folks who were enslaved and brought under duress and against their will. Those experiences are automatically going to be very different, and the Black community has certainly faced quite a bit of discrimination. Obviously, that's an understatement. I can only speak to my experience as a Indian American. I'll tell you sort of a funny but ridiculous story, and again, I'll talk also about how things have changed, because I think it's very easy to sort of look backwards and be like, this is how bad everything is. But one of the first big movies that I did was a movie called Van Wilder with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mixed applause. I appreciate that. So I had just gotten an agent to represent me after like 4 years of trying, and generally that's considered a very long time to get somebody to represent you. And through that process, there were plenty of very good agents and managers who would say things like, the scenes that you showed us from student films you did, you're very good, but unfortunately an Indian guy is never going to make us enough money in Hollywood for us to represent you. And a lot of people are shocked by this, but I actually appreciated their candor, because it allowed me to sort of then reshift, well, what do I have to do to get my foot in the door? So I finally had an agent. She's wonderful. And she called me up and she said, honey, there's a great script and a wonderful role. It's a supporting role in a movie with Ryan Reynolds, who at the time was only known for the sitcom Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. and Tara Reid, who had just finished American Pie. So this was like that sort of era. And she goes, I would love for you to audition for this. It's a supporting lead. It'll really help drive your career if you get this part. So I was very excited. I said, email me the script. I can't wait to read it and audition. Email me the script. What's the name of the character? And she goes, well, why don't you come to my office to pick up the script so we can talk about it? I was like, that's a weird thing to say. If you're that excited, just email me the script. I want to read it. And we went back and forth tons of times. And I said, if you send me the script, then I will come to your office after I read it. She goes, okay, I'm sending it to you now. I'm like, what's the name of the character? How will I know who I'm auditioning for? And she goes, well, the name of the character
Taj Mahal.
is Taj Mahal.
And that's a part of the name. That's only part
And so
of the
then,
name.
that's right.
Yeah.
So I hung up on her. And then she called back and she said, I thought you were going to do that. I said, this is a character named after a building? Like, I'm not even playing a human? I know exactly what this is. I'm not auditioning for this. And she walked me through, and I actually, to your point, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this based on what you do, but at the time in Hollywood, there was really only one executive level person of Indian origin. Her name is Sonia Nakor. She's no longer in the business, but she was a vice president of casting, somebody I looked up to as a mentor. I called her and I said, I read this script. The name of the character is Taj Mahal. The last name of the character we made Bada Landabad. You're welcome. And I said, I just don't know if I should audition for this script. She said, well, talk to me about, like, how many things are stereotypical in this script? I was like, I don't know, maybe like 40? She's like, well, what's the character? I said, well, he's an exchange student with a thick accent who, as it was originally scripted, was wearing like a dhoti and stuff. Like, it wasn't accurate at all for a portrayal of an exchange student. And like a lot of teen sex comedies dating back from the 80s, the character of color is either undersexed or oversexed. And so she said, well, okay, of those, she said, first of all, two things. One, I agree with your agent that if you get this part, it's really, really good for your career because it provides you with something on your resume that nobody can take away, and it makes it easier for your agent to get you future jobs. But number two, you should get this part and then talk to the writers and the director. Go in there and tell them that, you know, that there are, pick 10 things, 10 out of the 40 things in the script that you have a problem with, and talk to them about it. And I was like, okay, sweet. She goes, I'm not finished. You have to pick 10 things and come up with 10 things that are funnier than what they came up with. Because you have to understand that nobody is writing a script that's stereotypical with the sole purpose and the directive of dehumanizing someone. That's not what they're doing. They're doing this because they think it's funny and they think it'll sell tickets. So I said, well, this is very empowering. I didn't know that I could offer solutions. So, like, you're funny, that's why they're auditioning you. Come up with 10 things that are funnier, one of which became Badalandabad. So I went in, I wasn't sure if I was gonna take the job. I knew I was gonna audition. I was very tormented by this. And the final decision, you remember this if you read the book, but kept auditioning. By the way, Ryan Reynolds is wonderful. This has nothing to do with Ryan. He was tremendously supportive through the whole thing. But the last audition, I knew it was between me and one other guy. And I didn't know who that guy was, and it was a relatively small group of Indian Americans at the time in Hollywood. So I just knew it was me and another guy. I said, well, I'm curious to meet him. I'll meet him at the final audition where we go off against each other. And I walk into the final audition, and I signed in, and I look up, and he was already there in the waiting room, and he's a white guy in brown face, with like brown makeup on. And I just was like, huh, okay, two things in my head. I was like, number one, you're not allowed to get this part. I am getting this part. It's going on my resume. You can play like Brady from Ohio in a show, and I'm not allowed to do. So that's number one in my head. Number two, you generally don't have beef with other artists. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but it's like structurally, right? It's a business. They're just any actor is desperate to get their first couple of jobs. So he probably was desperate to get this job. And then I was like, I want to ask him, like, when did you put the makeup on? Like, did you do it here when you came? Or did you do it at home? And if you did it at home, did it increase your chances of getting pulled over by the cops? Or did you make it here safely? Like, I had all these questions in my head. And
now, Kal,
yeah.
You know, obviously, I've never appeared for an audition.
Yeah.
Good riddance. Right. what I want to say is that isn't cinema is a reflection of life. So as you're saying that if you wear a brown skin, there are more chances that you would be pulled up by the cop. Does it have anything to do with what happens in real life? I'll tell you my experience recently. I was in Germany, and I was talking to this diaspora there. And as you would have come across, that we've done recently a very high-profile global summit in Germany, Stuttgart. And it was attended by the cabinet ministers from India and Germany. And the diaspora felt very proud of being associated with it. Unfortunately, what I see, and I told the diaspora that, it's time that you mainstream Indian diaspora. I've seen whatever little, I've never stayed abroad, but when I travel abroad and I see that Indian diaspora are more comfortable to build a cozy corner for themselves, have a weekend for themselves, they're very happy being the Indian diaspora. I think what happened recently in the Senate, that Kash Patel started his speech saying that Jai Krishna, and I think time for India has arrived. And one of the things Indian diaspora needs to do, that they need to mainstream themselves. Do you think that's something to do with this stereotypical approach that we see in
I just
American
think
films?
it constantly evolves, right? Back in the day, 20 years ago, there were relatively few of us, but one of the big things that I give credit to with how much things have evolved is digital and streaming media. So the advent of Netflix and Amazon and other OTT platforms suddenly mean that our products are not only advertiser driven, they're also subscriber driven. So one of the big challenges with making television.
We democratized content. It's a choices on the viewer that what they want to watch,
Right.
not what the advertisers want them to watch.
Right, because when it's advertiser driven, you're always looking backwards. What made us money 2 years ago or 5 years ago? Let's do more of that because it worked with advertisers. And so to your point, we've actually had an explosion of very diverse content in the last 10 years. Basically anything Mindy Kaling has wonderfully written and brought on the air. She's brilliant. Priyanka is dipping her feet into everything, and she's crushing it, from the Oscar-nominated Indian content to things that she's doing in the States. There are a number of writers, stand-up comedians. I mean, I actually think that in the diaspora, there's been an explosion, and it's not just for South Asian audiences. It's for all audiences. And this is the example that I'm giving you, is that I think what it's proven wrong is this archaic way of looking at media. There was a fear that, well, if we cast a diverse show, there was this misnomer that white people won't watch diverse content, but diverse audiences will always watch white characters. And I think what you've seen in this equalization of content is the reality that humans will watch compelling stories, period. And streaming platforms have allowed that to happen.
So, thank you. I believe that I come from a state in India, Bengal, that used to be the beacon of art and creativity at some point in time, where we lost track. And I've often heard that Bengali directors making an appeal that please watch Bengali films. And I want to tell them that people don't watch Bengali film or any language film. People watch a film that happens to be in Bengali. Satyajit Ray created films which happen to be in Bengali, but he created global standard films.
Exactly.
Now, coming back to what I was saying, that since film is a reflection of real life, we need to bring about some changes. That's my feeling, that we are not also run, we're not follower anymore. I think the ascendancy of India is pretty apparent in the global arena, and I keep saying that I've been ridiculed in my boardroom, that I keep saying think big, think global. But it has to change in our house, in our home, the way we conduct. That's my feeling. I'm risking expressing it on the stage. That the auntie phenomenon that you have grown up with, where your aunties were very concerned about what's happening to which college you're getting admission to. So I think that's where it changes. I want you to tell this audience that how you grew up with this. We grew up with something called peer pressure, but some of our Indian families also grew up with something called auntie pressure.
I think we all had the fair amount of anti-pressure. I think what you're referring to is just the circumstance of immigration, right? In the States, if you were a kid of the 80s and 90s, then like I was saying, your parents were only allowed to come to America because they had these advanced degrees, and America had a labor shortage. So understandably, that meant that they would, their benchmark of success and stability was whatever careers they had. So at family functions, and this is very different than other ethnic or demographic groups in the U.S., but sort of like here, I mean, your parents' friends, who you lovingly refer to as aunties and uncles, you're not related to by blood, but that bond is oftentimes equally as strong. And in immigrant communities, I would argue that it's even more so sometimes, because it has to be sort of an insular protective community when it's an early immigration.
I have a radical view on this.
Go ahead.
You know, one of the Indian films has said, and that's very nicely put it, that when your friend fails, it hurts you. But when your friend comes first, it hurts you even more. You know, so I am not sure if those aunties would have been
cold as hell, man.
So, you know, I'm not sure those aunties would have been so concerned about you if their own sons or daughters were not going to Yale. So if they're going to Yale, they're going to Harvard, they got concerned about you that you're going to
I see what you're saying. No, I disagree. I think I believed that for a long time. When I was writing this book, there are plenty of stories in there about like all these extended aunties who are like, "Tu actor bane to tane sut hase." I was like, what do you mean sut hase? Like I intend to be an actor. Paisa kya thi aapse? I'm like, these are all legitimate questions. And especially when you're 15, they're like, "Tane khabar na thi." You know, when you grow up, khabar pad se, all that. So, but like, then at a certain point, so I grew up thinking that they had an opposition to the arts for some, whether it's this idea of a model minority, meaning that we have to behave differently. And when I was fact checking my book before it came out, I called my parents and I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, when all those aunties and uncles would berate me for wanting to be an actor, how embarrassed were you? Because I think it's important for me to put that in the book. And they said, we were never embarrassed, we were scared. And the whole community was scared because for us, we didn't know that the child of an immigrant in America could be an actor, or that even being an actor was a real job. You're talking about a post-colonial generation that had limited opportunities, and then on top of that, those opportunities that brought you to America to succeed with a very specific path. So the idea that they weren't shaming any of us, it was just fear that was driving that, and I think that's a beautiful sentiment.
I fully agree. You know, the time has changed.
Yeah.
Time has changed in the sense that when we were growing up, even when I was growing up, it's a very common thing that if you're good in maths, subject we didn't like much, if you're good in maths, you got to be an engineer. And if you're really good in maths, really, really good in maths, you got to go to IIT. In my time, there were only 4 IITs.
Yeah.
And if you're not that good in maths, you still have to do the medical. So that's what we grew up with. But in today's time, the next generation, if anyone is asked that they want to become Kal Penn or Barun does, the vote will go 99, if not 100 out of 100.
I don't think so.
Right. So the time has changed. But even then, you know, I would take this opportunity to say that while it's two sides of the same coin, and I don't think anything is absolute about it, but I can tell you that what I've done while I was growing up, and as I was growing up, I realized that you know, there's not even 5 to 8% of our lives that we spend on our own terms. Mm-hmm. You know, 90 to 95% of our time, we got to do something that we have to do. So I realized that I would do that 5 to 8% the way I want. And for me personally, mind was thicker than blood or relationship. So that's a perspective that I'm sharing with you. But of course, when we were growing up, that we had a different scenario altogether.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm mindful, they wanted us to keep about 15, 20 minutes for Q&A. Yep. So we can pivot over. Somebody have the microphones?
Right. So we will, yes, 15 to 20 minutes, we'll get into that. But I just want to have one last thing for the audience. I'm sure that this question will be preempted. You know, I was, you must have watched that Monk series, right?
Yes, of course.
One of my favorite ones. I could relate with that person, right? He's always serious. And the Monk has said once that, you know, the actor's life for a living, right? So you got to be somebody who's not that one all through. And I often grappled that, let's say if you're emotionally charged and you're dealing with Josh, how would Josh understand if you're acting or you're really sad or happy?
This is a question that I feel like my dad would ask, but the difference is my dad has an acting face. So like he always puts on a persona, and I'm like, I know you're acting, Dad. This is a ludicrous question because you're acting. But no, I think look what we
How
say.
would he understand? This is a genuine question. We'll go to the audience. I'm sure this is one of the questions that audience had. That is it difficult for an actor? You know, you get into the character. I think
Yeah.
one of the largest traits of a great actor that when I'm watching, let's say Al Pacino, I'm not watching Al Pacino or Robert De Niro. I'm watching the character, the taxi driver, or the blind dancer. So how do you come out of that acting sphere of yours and be natural in your normal life? Is it possible even?
There's a Meisner, Sanford Meisner, who's a wonderful sort of acting guru, and there's a sort of a phrase that acting is living realistically under imaginary circumstances, and that's sort of generally my approach.
So we'll
to things.
catch up on this after the show. So we'll take the questions from the audience.
Go for it.
Do they have a mic? Just give them a mic.
Yeah.
Hi, Kal, Papa CJ here. Two-part question. One, what did you learn about yourself in the process of writing your memoir? So were there patterns you spotted in your life, and what did you learn? And two, if art is an outward expression of an inward journey, in the course of your career in comedy and film, how has your art helped you evolve and grow as a human being?
I'll easily answer the second one first, which is, anybody do this question and we can talk later, but like anybody who's funny or who loves comedy, like people have asked, like, so when do you think you developed the funny? I'm like, oh, when I got bullied in 8th grade. Definitely when I got bullied in 8th grade, I just learned how to be funny. So everyone's got this like weird origin story. Sometimes it's tied up in personal things like that. Generally, other times it's something else entirely. What was the first part of that question? I'm sorry. Oh, what did I learn about myself? So, all right, so I told you about the difference between writing a script and writing a book. I have plenty of friends who have written books, and a couple of them started texting me as I was halfway through the process, and they were like, hey man, how's the book coming? Also, how much do you hate yourself right now? And I was like, how did you know? Is that a thing? They're like, why do you think so many authors are drunks? It's because the process of writing a book is excruciating. And so I was just glad that like that was a real thing. It almost felt like therapy, especially, you do like 10 revisions and 10 rounds of things.
Did it also reflect your cerebral quotient? A comedian getting into an actor getting into politics, we've seen enough of that. But actor writing a book of that quality, I think that is a reflection that you're a thinking individual too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's very kind of you.
No. Please let others to have a go at the question. Yes.
Hi. What I wanted to ask you is, obviously a lot of your work has been about the Indian diaspora experience, and you also mentioned that your parents might not have been that encouraging about your artistic pursuits. But did you also grow up with maybe some favorite authors or books or TV shows or movies of your parents that somehow ended up shaping your artistic pursuits later, like having written this book?
Definitely. Thank you for the question. I mean, the influences that I had were mostly American. It was folks like Tom Hanks or Denzel Washington. Mira Nair, certainly from the time I was a kid when she did Mississippi Masala. I was around the same time that I was doing the geometry nonsense and looking at her and saying, wow, if this woman can do this, maybe there's a path forward. And then the stuff that my parents watched, who is not a huge Amitabh Bachchan fan, but the original Dawn is still like, I would love to remake Dawn. But like, it can be so escapist. It can still be in that same vein, same color palette, just like set it in Brooklyn or set it in Ohio, and it's just still a whole different world. But there are a lot of those. I'll tell you something I was telling Barun backstage, which is, my Gujarati is good. English is my first language. My Hindi's okay. So whenever I work in India, I try to get a script, 2 months in advance, and it's fine. But one of the ways that I try to learn and keep up Hindi as somebody who struggles with it a bit is by watching serials. So I got addicted a few years ago to Saath Nibhana Satya. So like Kokila Ben is just a bad ass. Like, you do not want to cross her. And Gopi, obviously it's a meme, but like Gopi washing the laptop. It's like, how do I explain how good these episodes are to my American non-Indian friends? There's no possible way. So those are also some of my more recent influences.
Sorry.
I figured you weren't expecting it.
I couldn't relate with the joke. I haven't seen the soaps. But before the next question comes up, please give this mic to this lady. Before next question comes up, I just want you to be mindful about the fact, and let me know in private, that how many people that you think before asking the questions prepared themselves as you prepared before asking the question to Obama.
Which question?
The question that you asked to Obama when you first met Obama, you prepared about.
Oh, yeah.
So just keep it
I'll
there.
keep that in mind,
So figure out how many of them had prepared well.
So my question is, you've played Seth, you played Kevin twice, Kevin Campbell in Big Bang Theory, and that was a hilarious plot line.
Thank you.
And it was about imposter syndrome, and all your characters have been about identity, like your character Gogoi in The Namesake. So is that by design, or is that something you've consciously done?
I can answer this question.
Go ahead, answer it.
Please go on.
I want Cal to answer.
He would. He
I
won't
don't think
disappoint you.
I would actually reject that notion. First of all, I appreciate that you've seen those because they are some of my favorites. But I don't think that the How I Met Your Mother role or some of the like stuff on Law and Order where I played a serial rapist, like none of that stuff had anything to do with identity. But I do value a lot of the. I mean, I would hope. Maybe if it was set in Delhi. But the point is the roles that are based on identity, I also think, particularly if it's set in specific time periods, are relevant because a lot of these stories in insular communities really need to be told. And then hopefully we can get to a place where we can really like tackle very interesting stories.
Next. Where the mic goes?
By the way, that was not
you prefer would ask the next question.
That was not a slam on Delhi. It was a slam on the horrible crimes against women happening right now. I just want to be clear.
Hi. So there is this saying, uneasy lies the head that bears the crown. So I have a question for Barun.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Please.
How do you balance your role as a successful business leader and host of a cerebral talk show duologue? Particularly when you get deeper into the skin of the guest who is being hosted.
Oh, excellent. First of all, this is not a planted question. I personally do not know this gentleman, but it's a nice question. It is actually two different poles. You know, as I said that when I run an organization and as complicated business as News Network, you have to understand the true predicaments that I deal with running a news network. The first predicament is all powers rest on the journalist. So you have the journalist to speak their mind out, and yet you want them to perform in a particular way. So it's an oxymoron in itself. The second predicament that I run while running a news network is that I believe the three sectors in our lives should not be converted into business. One is health, the second is education, the third is media. I personally feel that the effect of these three sectors will have ramification in generations. So it's a very difficult task to make business out of news media. So I straddle that path in a way that I try and stay close to my identity, the identity of a fourth estate. So that's one part of it. So when I actually do duologue, my colleagues have conned me into doing duologue. I'm supposed to be behind the camera, never in front of the camera. But in duologue, it's not a question answer. I bounce off my own philosophies. I have many theories in life, which I bounce off with them. And I feel that more often than not, life and your profession, there's a blurring line. You straddle from one to another. Like I don't wear a different hat when I walk back home in the evening. So I try and be myself on the duologue set, which I can't be while running the organization. I hope that I've answered your question. Thank you. Yes, the lady there. And with...
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Kal, for being here, and thank you, Barun. Kal, I've watched you in Designated Survivor, and I know of your work in the White House.
Thank you.
So the work that you did there, was it a star spark, pun intended, or would you go back over there, or you're just a star now?
I mean, I wouldn't go back now, but they also probably would not have me back at the White House now. My role, it's a great question. I know we didn't have time to sort of talk about the full arc of how, if you only know me from doing stoner movies, it's obviously a very legitimate question of like, how the hell did you end up working at the White House? And I won't pimp out the book too much, but it's in there. But the short answer is when I had volunteered to work for the Obama campaign for about a year, a little over a year, mostly working on outreach to young people and cultural diplomacy. So I have I did my graduate studies in international security. And so I worked for an office called the Office of Public Engagement, focusing mostly as the president's liaison to young Americans. And that was the majority of the job, and it was actually the opposite. In my final interview for the job, the woman who became my boss, the senior advisor to the president, Valerie Jarrett, I had the same question you have. And I said to her, I would just like to know, am I being hired just because I'm an actor who like worked for you guys for free for a year? Am I being hired because I'm an actor? And she had this amazing stone cold face on, and she goes, I can assure you, you're being hired in spite of it. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, all right. Now, I will say, it was not all, like, it was a learning curve, and there were a couple of days where I forgot that I'm a government bureaucrat and not an actor, and I'll give you one specific example. Everything in a government document is an acronym. So at first, like if you're talking about the National Security Council, the email that you get says National Security Council, and then in parentheses it says NSC. And then the rest of the document, it says NSC would like you to know, blah, blah, blah. On my second day at the White House, I get added to a massive NSC email chain. It says, Kal, you deal with young people on behalf of the president. The president is meeting with a delegation from the Philippines. We would like you to know about the following terror organization. This terrorist group, by the way, there are 100 people CC'd on this email. This terrorist group is called the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. And then in parentheses, it just says MILF. And then the rest of the email is, MILF is considered highly dangerous. MILF is known to recruit young men. Many young men grow to regret their affiliation with MILF over time. And on and on. And I was like,
Brilliant.
This is amazing.
Brilliant.
So I hit reply all, and I typed, yo, their main terror group are the MILFs? Awesome. And as soon as I hit send, I was like, no, this is not a comedy writer's room. This is the National Security Council at the White House. In the halls, all of my friends were like, yo, that shit was so funny. We were thinking it too. And I said, can one of you please just hit reply all and write LOL? That's all I'm asking. They're like, no,
Brilliant.
Absolutely not, because this is a public record and we don't want to be on the record having
Brilliant. We need to wind up. I've just
Sure.
sought for an extension of 2 minutes,
Oh,
1.5
okay.
minutes
Sorry, I talked too
actually.
much.
I have a last winding up question for you.
Yeah.
Like we say that you grow up when you actually mature, when you start doing things which you think should be done, not what we like to do, right? So, like I also in a real life, when I deal with people, I tell them that what they should know, not what they like to know. And I believe that there's a price that you have to pay to be nice, and I often refuse to pay that price. So I want to ask you, Kal, that as an individual, we've seen your screen time. Are you a nice person? Do you want to be nice? Or you're a rebel in it yourself?
I mean, I totally disagree with that notion. I think kindness does not cost anything. And I think if somebody is being kind to you, you also don't know their story.
No, it is not about kindness. It is about telling what you feel right. That how you put it is a different way.
But I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that in order to move forward with anything, you need to hear all opinions and all possible choices, and many of those will be
So you're a nice
difficult.
person then.
I'd like to be.
Good.
I also like being around
Good.
nice people.
Now we can't take any more questions, so we have to wind up now. The organizers are hard pressed
Okay.
for time, and they've been meeting. They've been sticking to the clock very meticulously.
Yes.
So we should let them continue with that. Thank you very much for being a brilliant
Thanks
audience.
to you,
Thank
Barun.
you.
Thank you all for coming. We've got about a half hour of book signing before they pull me to another event. So we'll stick around for a little while. But thank you all so much. Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, make some noise for Barun Das and the legendary Kal Penn. To view this session and many more, please tune into the official Jaipur Literature Festival YouTube channel. All our sessions, our related content will be available there, so be sure to like and subscribe. Kal will be signing books towards the left of the venue in this book signing tent. As you all know, the Jaipur Music Stage opens at 7 p.m. tonight with performances beginning at 7:30 at Charbagh, featuring acts by Kamakshi Khanna, Sushila Raman, Sam Mills, Nathulal Solanki and Chugye Khan.